Alright, so we got a weird opportunity here in the shop, and I'm going to try to get the Maslow together. Let's see how it goes. The time of this recording was late summer 2019. At this point, I'd been working pretty non-stop on the siding for my house, and I managed to get a little window to work in before the contractors came to finish the job. So today, I'm getting the new top beam mounted up. I do want to point out here that we have moved some stuff around since our last video. You may have noticed that the Maslow is now kind of spun around, and it's kind of creating this alleyway here. It's just out of the frame of the shop, but I had just purchased a series of cabinets to make up like a nice workbench along the wall that the Maslow used to be on. So for the time being, the Maslow is just living here. I'll probably end up moving it to the back wall of the shop at some point in the near future, but this works for now, and it creates kind of this nice little alleyway here in the third bay. So what you're seeing here is kind of the first step towards getting the top beam mounted up, and I'm taking all of these unistrut channels that I had pre-cut and start to bolt them up inside the brackets. In some cases I do have to finish torquing down the brackets themselves. I didn't fully tighten everything down the last time I was working. I was just so tired from drilling all those holes. So I'm making sure with each one that I'm tightening stuff up. And you can kind of see there on that last bracket that I threw bolt through the end of the bracket, so it's secured really well in the bracket, and that was part of the reason that I chose these. And this middle one that I'm working on, you'll see in a minute, I'm grabbing at the section for it, and it's longer than all the other ones. And that's because I wanted to make like a little carrier channel for the Z-axis wires to all kind of dangle down and not get tangled up in stuff like the chains and everything like that. It's funny, in the background here you can see my family members all kind of wandering around, my dad and my brother, and we're all kind of talking and trying to figure out some of the stuff for the outside of the house. And actually here I drop one of my bolts and everybody's helping me kind of find it, which I thought was kind of funny. But yeah, we were all just kind of trying to get everything organized and ready, because as I mentioned at the beginning, we were getting ready to have contractors come by and put all the vinyl siding on our house. So you can see, like in this process here where I'm going, I'm also making sure that all of the brackets that mount the channels are all sitting perfectly level and flush, and it was actually a little involved here with these last two. I guess they were just sitting a little bit further off. So I'm going in and making sure everything looks right, making sure it's sitting level with the old top beam of the frame. But I was really just trying to make sure that the top beam was going to sit level across all of these brackets here, because any bit of misalignment could totally lead to everything being out of level. Alright, so we got all of our uprights installed now. So these are all secured to the frame. Next up is the top beam. I gotta get the new motors, well, the new motor mounts mounted to the ends. And then we get that mounted up on these rails. And that's the top beam wrapped up. So since we last saw our top beam, I've actually disassembled the motor brackets and given it a good coat of paint to have it match all the rest of the frame of the machine. So when I was reattaching these motors, I actually learned something from our last time putting them together and mounted the motor itself to the brackets ahead of time and just left the bolts loose so I could slide it over the end of the tube like you saw there. And then it's just a simple matter of taking all the actual mounting hardware to get it to mount to the top beam and just tightening those up and getting everything kind of lined up and everything. And there you see my idler sprocket I'm putting at the outmost position. I've actually since moved it to the middle position. I found it gets a little bit better engagement there. When it's so much further out, the chain kind of will slide off it a little bit easier, so I found the middle was pretty good, and the other side it was almost too close. So at this point I'm going to now get started on the other side, which is pretty much the repeat of the first side. So I'm just going to let the music play for a minute, and we'll join back up when I put this beam in place. It's all about posture. In order to get that top beam up, I just needed to get underneath it real good to lift it up. And you can actually see I'm using one end to kind of leverage the other in place to make it a little bit easier. That top beam isn't exactly light at this point, so it was a little difficult. With it in place, I can now just grab all the hardware I need, which is all 3/8, 16th hardware. And I'm also going to use the little spring clips that mount into the unistrut so they all stay preloaded towards the edge of the channel. And I'm just going to start putting the hardware in, starting at either end, just to make sure that I'm kind of working my way into the middle and getting everything to line up. You can actually see with that bracket there, it wasn't positioned quite right, left to right, so I had to give it a little bit of a tap to get it to line up. So with all the bolts in place, now I'm opening up Fusion 360 so I can actually look at the whole model I have for the frame and get a good idea of what I'm dealing with. While I'm waiting for Fusion to do its thing, I'm just cinching up all the bolts a little bit. They were all just started to be threaded, so I was kind of closing them up a little bit more here. And of course, Fusion 360 always takes so long to load, so I just had to wait for it to go through its paces. This computer I'm using here isn't exactly the newest computer either, so that's not helping my case. Making sure that I get all the dimensions right was a bit of a time-consuming process. So I would have to go in and actually look at the model and the section I was interested in and compare the dimensions that it has on the screen and then what I'm seeing in real life. So I was just going back and forth between the machine and Fusion, just kind of getting a good sense of what I was dealing with here. We'll see this in a second here, but I'm kind of going in and making marks to line up my top beam so that I can ensure that everything's even when I bolt everything down at the end. So I'm getting the new top beam mounted up, and I did some quick looking at the CAD model just to kind of see what the offset that I need for the meticulous Z-axis. In here I've marked both a 5-inch and a 4-inch offset. That's, if we're looking at the Z-axis, we're talking about this height here, which is going to be the height that I mount my linkage set at. And because I'm not entirely certain which one I'm going to need yet, it's probably going to be the 4, but I figured I might as well put the 5 in there just to be safe. I put those both here, and it's a little harder to see down on this end, but it did also mount right into the frame here, so I can line them up quite easily on either end. Which makes this setup quite easy. Now that I have my reference points and I know where things are supposed to be, all I have to do is tighten down the bolts that secure the top beam to the unistrut channels. You can see I got my mallet out and I'm just giving it some fine-tune adjustments back and forth to try to get it really lined up with those marks. It's really important that I get that distance right, because if this is ever so slightly out of line, it's going to give me a lot of headache with chain skips later on. So not only am I lining it up with the marks, but I'm also going back in with my tape measure and measuring that. Using my hammer with the tape measure out like that gives me the ability to really dial it in and get a good sense of where that beam is in relation to everything else. So I'm working on the outer two ends first to get that alignment as good as possible, and then from there I'll work my way from the center out and get everything tightened down so I can make sure that the new top beam is secure to the frame. Because that's not going anywhere. All these are lined up. All that looks good. Motors are mounted, which means oh my god, it's so close. Aha! Motor cables are just long enough. No! No! Why is this one shorter? For Christ's sake. Probably because the controller is mounted that much closer to that one than it is the other one. Damn it. That's not going to give me any more, is it? I'm like 6 inches short.
Okay, so what, you have to add more wire in?
Yeah, I either have to make an extender or I have to just make a longer cable. Here's the Z-axis, which now carries out through this track. Ah, so close. Gonna have to check what I have in my drone kit, I think. Other than that, this actually needs to move from where it is. It's going to need to route over to the computer over there for the time being. So yeah, I'm about wiring. My favorite part. Alright. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this installment of the Super Maslow series. In our next video, we're going to cover this little wiring snafu I got into and see if we can't get this machine actually working.